listening to Not Crazy, a Psych Central podcast, hosted by my ex-husband who has bipolar disorder. Together, we created the mental health podcast for people who hate mental health podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Not Crazy. My name is Gabe Howard, and I am here with my co-host, Lisa.
Hi, I am Lisa.
You say that every week.
I know. I need to do something better.
There's just there's 7 days in between every show. We're in the middle of a quarantine, so I know you're not going to concerts or out dancing. What is more important than coming up with a better, hi, this is Lisa?
I will take suggestions in the comment section. Like, share, and subscribe, and let me know what I should be saying.
I swear if next week you say, hello, cool cats and kittens, I
should start doing that.
No, that's not yours.
Oh.
Somebody else has that.
That's a good one, though.
Speaking of the quarantine, Lisa, when we were married, we talked about having kids.
We did.
And ultimately, we decided not to have children for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was that we ultimately got divorced, so clearly we couldn't stand each other. So
we ran out of time.
Yeah, but I'm seeing all of these people with the quarantine talk about being trapped at home with children. Uh-huh. And you see a lot of families on social media anyway.
Yeah, right.
But this is probably the most negative that I've seen these families. Usually it's perfect photos, perfect moments, perfect memories, and parents are starting to crack and they're just like, I want my kids to go to grandma and grandpa's. I hate them so much right now. And then they put like winky face. I think the winky face is supposed to let us non-people know. It got me thinking about, should people with mental illness have kids? And my decision to have kids, because
right.
I made the decision not to have children. I had a vasectomy. It's over for Gabe.
And mental illness was a big part of your decision-making back in the day.
Yeah. It was. And I wanted to talk about it more because I think it's a fascinating discussion. I think it's a fascinating topic. And of course, people have just said incredibly supportive things about my decision. People have said incredibly offensive things about my decision. And people have just commented on it like it's their right to comment on it. Yeah.
Everybody thinks it's okay to comment on other people's reproductive decisions, which of course means you're commenting on their sex lives. So stop it.
But that made me think, hey, there is a podcast in here, but of course, neither one of us had kids. So it seemed rude. It seemed rude not to get someone who lives with bipolar disorder, who made the decision to have children, and talk to her about it. And it also goes along with our show. We decided when we were creating this show that we didn't want to just interview people with mental illness. We feel that's just well represented in the space. Right? You just,
right.
You can tell your story on social media. There's This Is My Brave, which is an incredible outlet for people to tell their stories about living with mental illness in a positive and incredible way. And the reason that I bring this up is because that's where I found Amy. Amy Barnabi and I met when we did the 2019 This Is My Brave in Columbus, Ohio. And what I love about Amy more than anything is that we're both about the same age. So I love it because I'm starting to feel like everybody is younger than me.
Almost everyone at This Was My Brave was dramatically younger than you.
So I liked having Amy around for that very reason. She also lives with bipolar, so we had a lot in common that way. And honestly, she's just an ultra cool person. So big shout out to This Is My Brave for introducing us. Big shout out to Amy for agreeing to be on the show. And to wrap this all up in a nice little bow, what we wanted to create was a space for people with lived experience with mental illness to come on and discuss the things that are important to them, to talk about the things that are important to them, not just come on and be a source of inspiration, which, make no mistake, Amy is a definite source of inspiration, but I want to know how Amy feels about stuff, thinks about stuff, and talks about stuff. And I'm really looking forward to Amy telling me I'm wrong. Does that make sense, Lisa?
I would prefer that she tell me that I'm right, but yours is good too.
All right, Lisa, are you ready to bring Amy onto the show?
Absolutely. But first, I want to say that whether or not you choose to have kids is your own concern, and it's not the business of anybody else.
I could not agree more. And it's kind of sad that we need to say that anyways.
Yeah.
All right, Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Gabe. Hi, Lisa. How are you guys doing?
Hi.
We are super glad to have you.
Oh, thanks. First things first, Gabe. Are you telling me that I'm old? And yes, Lisa, you are right.
They were all so young. It's depressing.
I'm not telling you that. I'm saying that we're old. I don't know how it happened. And it happened like instantly. When I got started in the space, I was 25 and I was bouncing around with all this enthusiasm and energy. And then one day I noticed that I started walking onto the stage just a little bit slower. And I was sharing it with people who were dancing on the stage. I'm like, what is happening?
Well, that with the pandemic, you don't know if it's day 3 or year 5. So
that is very true. Amy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Let's just leap right in. Amy, you live with bipolar disorder. You have children. What is the most offensive thing that somebody has said about that?
Ooh, I bet there's going to be a good one here. I bet someone has said something like really offensive.
Oh, right after I got married, I was seeing a clinician at one of our local mental health centers, and she actually told me straight up, "You're bipolar. You shouldn't have children."
Just like that. Just looked you right in the eyes and said, you have a medical diagnosis, therefore I am advising you. I guess she wasn't even advising you.
Yeah.
Did she say it that harshly?
Yeah, it was that harsh. I mean, it was like matter of factly, like, you shouldn't. What do you mean? No, I never thought about it. I shouldn't have children because I have a mental illness. That's your opinion, not mine.
Did she have more reasoning, or did she explain her reasoning or give any specifics?
No, not necessarily. It was just one of those things towards the end of the session. It was probably only like the second or third time that I saw her. And I only saw her the time. I did not see her after that because I cried all the way home. I never thought about it. I honestly never thought, well, I'm not going to have children because I have bipolar disorder. And then it made me think, am I being selfish?
There are considerations when having children. There just are. There's considerations when having children. Do you have enough money? Do you have enough time? Are you stable? Are you ready for children? Children are all consuming and you need to be ready for them. And obviously, if you have an illness, whether it be bipolar disorder or any illness, you've got to figure out how that will impact your ability to raise a child, et cetera. I think we all know that the world is not clean.
Right. And it was something my husband and I had discussed. When I married my husband, he had a 5-year-old son. And so we did talk about, well, how many children are we thinking here? He was very aware of my bipolar disorder. It was something I disclosed about 3-4 months into our relationship when it was starting to get serious. But it wasn't like, well, we should only have one child because I'm bipolar. Essentially, in the end, that was something that came to mind and something actually my mother and I discussed. Life's hard enough and children are even that much harder. So you need to really consider where your time and energy is going to go. But in terms of, what my husband and I decided, it wasn't just because, well, you're bipolar, we shouldn't have children.
That's the part that is kind of getting me the most, that somebody would just look you in the eyes and declare for you. Like Lisa said, I'm going to throw this over to Lisa. Lisa said, when people are talking about your child rearing, or no, what is it that you said? When
reproductive.
Yeah, when people are talking about your decision to have kids or not have kids, they are injecting themselves into your sex life. Lisa, can you expand on that?
Absolutely.
Because I've never heard it put that way before.
You've never heard anyone say that?
No, I thought we were just talking about kids. I was just minding my own business and talking about little, I was thinking babies.
I've just always thought that was really weird because, we all know where babies come from. So why would you think this is any of your business?
I don't know.
Going back, Amy, when you say that your husband was really aware, etc., I was just wondering, how long had you been dating before you decided to get married? And had he seen you super sick, or were you in a pretty good or stable place at that time?
That's a really good point. No, I've been, for the most part, knock on wood, highly functioning with my bipolar disorder most of my life. So I was healthy. My husband is a few years older than me, but I was in my early 30s. So we really, it was one of those things. We got married a little over a year after we met. So it was one of those things, 3-4 months into it, we were talking about, okay, we got serious pretty fast because, first of all, I think we both knew what we wanted at that point in time.
Well, you're not exactly spring chickens by then.
Wow, now you're calling her old. This poor woman.
No.
She's never going to come back to the show.
I'm just saying,
right.
When you're dating and you're 22, it's not the same as when you're dating and you're 35.
Right.
It's a lot different.
Well, and with my husband having a young son too,
right.
How attached is too attached. If we're going to do this, we need to do this because, he's falling in love with you. And I can honestly say that I fell in love with Ryan before he fell in love with Mike. So
I do think that it's an interesting point, though. Did anybody give, and you might not know the answer to this, but did anybody give your husband shit about letting a woman with bipolar disorder around his kid? I mean, did anybody pull him aside and say,
question.
hey, why are you letting this woman with mental illness around your child? Or did that just never come up?
You know, it's interesting. One of his very best friends in the world has struggled with severe depression all of his life. So it wasn't something totally new. It wasn't like, okay, you're bipolar. I mean, it was a long, very long conversation that we had because he was very aware of how much depression can affect someone's life. And then you add the fact that I also get manic. So it wasn't something that he jumped into and then figured out later. He was somewhat aware of it. You know, we didn't tell his family for many, many, many years. In fact, until I got really sick, his family wasn't aware that I was bipolar. And that was a little bit of a shock. And that was a difficult conversation. It was one of those things I felt, you know, as much as I love them and as much as they love me, I had to kind of defend myself a little bit. And I was really sick at the time. And it wasn't like they meant to say hurtful things, but it was like, did Mike know this before you got married?
Wow. I just have so many questions for you, Amy, because you said that when you drove home after the doctor said that to you, you were thinking, is it selfish to have children? Or because I determined for Gabe, for me, that it was selfish to have children because I felt two things very strongly. One, I felt that I was too sick to have children. You know, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, the psychosis. I mean, it was just all too much. Gabe Howard cannot be a father because after all, you can't be a father and be that sick. The second thing that kept going through my mind, which I thought was very selfish, is the horror show that was my life. I did not want to genetically pass on to another living creature so that they could suffer as well. I ultimately regret my decision. I don't necessarily regret not having kids. I regret the reason that I came up with.
Right.
The truth of the matter is when I made the decision not to have children, I was correct. I was too sick to be a father in those moments. I was very sick. But that also means that my thinking was that I was never going to get any better.
Yeah.
I don't think that's fair.
Then why didn't I do it?
You're not just saying that you're never going to get better. You're saying that there's a potential that it will happen again. Maybe you're going to be better. You're going to get better. You're going to be better for like 10 years. And of course, the kids didn't go anywhere in that time. They didn't disappear. You will continue to be ill on and off throughout their lives.
But I think part of being mentally ill is being stuck in the moment. You forget how good feels like. And when you're well, you forget how bad feels like.
How did you get over that? You have two children, 23 and 15. The 15-year-old is the biological child, but he's 15. He's wonderful. You have a normal family. You're still married. I'm not saying that the world is all joy and roses or that you've never had any issues in life, but they haven't been caused by bipolar disorder. They've just been caused by life has issues in it. So I'm just curious as to how you got over that hump because, and I'm asking for me, I never did. I was like, Gabe, you suck. You must have a vasectomy. You should never have children. You're a horrible person. Done. And you didn't. So I'm like looking at you. I'm like, Amy, tell me your secret.
And there's definitely no secret there. You know what? Every day is a fight. I am bipolar and I have to treat bipolar first. Sometimes little things stress me out and sometimes they don't. My son and I, my 15-year-old son, Nate, and I were talking. And I said, but I hate that a lot of my memories or a lot of your memories is going to be about me flipping out sometime in your life and how stressful that must have been for you. And he said to me, Mom, I'm going to remember more good times with you than bad times. And, for me, I exemplify the bad times. I think, oh my God, this is always remember. And it's not that. I'm not screwing him up as much as I think I am. And even that much. My best friends are screwing up their children the same way. And they're not bipolar. So, yes, it can be difficult at times, but my God, they're so worth it. I look at them every day and I think, my God, how lucky I am to have such a wonderful family and be surrounded by so much love.
That is it. Ultimately, I don't know if I made the right decision or not, but that's just life, right? We never know if we made the right decision.
Right.
I got to tell you, right now during the pandemic, I feel really good about not having children.
Well, what I want to know is when you said you had this thought that, hey, is this selfish? How did you move beyond that?
Right.
I mean, what was your thought process? What happened between, oh, this is selfish and, okay, yes, let's have kids?
I guess as far back as I can think, for me and being surrounded with a big family, It was just the natural progression, getting married. We both had good jobs. Okay, let's bring another life into the world.
So you had an understanding from an early age that you did want to be a parent.
Yeah. And I never said, well, maybe I shouldn't because I'm bipolar, because I have a mental illness. It's interesting because that never crossed my mind until that doctor told me, well, you shouldn't have children. Yeah. I never thought twice about it. My mom and I have lengthy, real life discussions. And she did suggest maybe just one child, because essentially you're going to have two altogether. And life is hard enough from any standpoint, again, from the family next door that doesn't struggle with the same things. Kids are tough. Kids are hard, and kids are very expensive.
Yeah.
One of the cool things that I like about my job, being a public speaker and telling stories about my life, before my bipolar diagnosis and after in my childhood, is I get to ask my parents a lot of questions that I think just maybe a lot of people don't ask their parents. And one time I asked my dad if he was sorry that he married my mom. See, I'm adopted, so my dad is not my biological dad. He's my real dad. But, this poor guy, he's minding his own business. He meets this woman, he marries her, adopts her kid, and now he's got a severely mentally ill child. Wow. Mm-hmm. And my dad was just he's it was hard. I mean, he didn't blow smoke up my ass and tell me that he was all excited the day he found out that I was, severely ill. But he's it is what it is. Mm-hmm. Bad things happen to families. And he thinks that people try to predict too much, and that this prevents people from just living in the moment or from having joy. He talks about friends that decided not to have children because they didn't think they made enough money. And ultimately, They missed out on having kids. Did they make enough money? He doesn't know, because who knows? But he knows that they don't have kids. Mm-hmm. So he thinks that people try to find excuses, and he really desperately tried to talk me out of the decision.
Really?
He really wanted me to have kids.
You never told me that.
Yeah, he keeps trying to get me to adopt kids. He keeps trying to find me children. He sends me links.
No, I knew that. But you're telling me that back when you had the vasectomy, your dad tried to talk you out of it?
Yeah, he was devastated by it. Yeah.
You never told me that.
Yeah, he did not like it at all. He said that it was a mistake, that I shouldn't do it, that times will change.
Really?
What you feel today is not what you will feel tomorrow. And, my dad is he's a truck driver. He's a man's man. So he's basically quoting the posters that people hang in there, hang in there. It gets better with the little kitten. Yeah.
I think your dad should have his own podcast.
Every now and again, I have him on a video or something, and people send me letters.
He's well received.
They just love him. For real. I need to exploit this. But he wasn't able to sway me. I guess that's what I'm saying. He wasn't able to sway me. But, listen, the bastard was right. But I asked my dad about this a lot. Do you regret having me as a child? And I know some of that is because I'm adopted. Mm-hmm. And because some people have told me that oh, well, your stepdad, which is horribly offensive and makes me angry, but they'll say well, your stepdad inherited another man's mess. Mm-hmm. And I've asked my dad about that.
Wow, someone actually said that to you?
Yeah, this is the problem with being a public figure.
I know.
God, people are jerks.
Yes, they are.
My dad is just look, life is just like that. And my mom is the same way. I know we spent a lot of time, but my mom, I'm hey, are you sad that you got a messed up kid? And she's I never considered that I had a messed up kid. You were just always gay.
Yeah.
And I have such a hard time seeing life that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because that's my personality or it's because I have bipolar disorder. But to get us back on a little bit of track, Amy, do you feel, Lisa, you take this one.
Well, I don't want to be the killjoy who always has to be the negative voice here, but it is my role. You're saying that you've asked your mother or your father, and obviously I don't think they do. I mean, your dad has always been your dad. There's never been any of that stepfather crap. But having said that, seriously, what are you expecting them to answer? Let's say your dad did think, oh, yeah, this is terrible. This is the worst mistake I've ever made. He's not going to say that. He's not going to tell you that out loud. What kind of horrible person would say such a thing?
Wow, you do not understand the dynamics of my family at all. Are you kidding? My dad would tell me, this is not a problem in the Howard household. We call each other out all the time. He would absolutely be I hate you.
How come that doesn't surprise me?
I deliberately made the decision not to have children. And many people, especially many women, have told me that they just always expected that they would have kids, that all growing up, they just always thought that someday they would have children.
Yeah.
Or they were always looking forward to that, which is apparently how you felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I just personally never felt that. So I have a little bit of trouble understanding that point of view.
Right.
So I never thought that I would just automatically have kids. When I was a little kid, I wasn't thinking, oh, yeah, well, someday I'll be the mom.
Yet another answer to the mystery of why we didn't make it as a couple, ladies and gentlemen. For those playing at home.
There's so much you guys.
Right?
There's so much you guys don't understand about each other. There's so much you don't know about one another.
The mystery is still there. We learn new stuff all the time. And that is actually one of the things that I felt bad about since we got divorced that I learned. But that's a whole other topic. I will add it to the list of future podcasts.
Next week on a very special Not Crazy.
Our entire society is very oriented around this idea that having children is very much natural, or what everyone wants, or what everyone desires, or, the cult of true motherhood, right?
I think, though, in the same breath, I think because, and this is just my opinion, the friends that I do have that don't have children, like I talk about this overwhelming love, you've never felt that because you don't have children. And I guess it's the same thing with mental illness. Unless you walk the walk, you don't understand it. And that's okay. That's a choice everyone has. But I know from my perspective, from being a mother, it's difficult. There are pains in the asses a lot of the times, but there is nothing in the world that I want more than to wake up or to go to bed and kiss my kids and tell them how much I love them. And it actually makes me appreciate my husband even more sometimes, not always, because he's also a pain in the ass, but it's like, you gave me these guys and I can't imagine any greater gift than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to kind of put out there that there are plenty of people who have very happy, very fulfilling lives without children. And, they're not necessarily for everyone. They're not necessarily the end all be all for everyone. Mm-hmm. And there's a very strong bias against, I think very few parents are going to say, oh, I regret this. So,
all right. Yeah,
kind of like Gabe's parents saying, no, we love you regardless.
Well, yeah,
fine. Okay. My parents are liars. They regret having. No.
That's not. There is no way for me to say this and not sound like an evil bitch.
No, Lisa.
People often say,
no, you need.
I understand.
People often say to me, you regret not having children.
I get it.
It's very frustrating to me because people are always saying, oh, you might regret it. You might regret it. You'll regret this someday. No one ever says that in the reverse. No one ever says you are going to regret having this child. And there is no reason or incentive for parents to ever say a word if they do, in fact, regret having kids.
Yeah, absolutely right.
All right. Hold that thought, everybody. We have to hear from our sponsors and we'll be right back.
Interested in learning about psychology and mental health from experts in the field? Give a listen to the Psych Central Podcast, hosted by Gabe Howard. Visit psychcentral.com/show or subscribe to the Psych Central Podcast on your favorite podcast player.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp.com. Secure, convenient, and affordable online counseling. All counselors are licensed, accredited professionals. Anything you share is confidential. Schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus chat and text with your therapist whenever you feel it's needed. A month of online therapy often costs less than a single traditional face-to-face session. Go to BetterHelp.com/Psych Central and experience 7 days of free therapy to see if online counseling is right for you. BetterHelp.com/Psych Central.
We're back discussing whether or not people with bipolar disorder should have children with our special guest, Amy Barnabi.
I had my tubes tied when I was young. And when I got sterilized, every doctor said, you might regret this someday. But I was 22. If I had walked into a doctor's office pregnant at 22 and said, hey, here I am. I'm pregnant. I'm going to have this baby. No one would have said to me, you might regret that someday.
And you know what, Lisa, that's almost as bad as a doctor telling me, hey, you shouldn't have children because you're bipolar. Yeah. And I mean, I can see that now. I can see how offensive that would be to you.
Again, when you decide, yes, I will have children, people accept that. That's no problem. That is not a decision that needs explained. But if you say, yes, I am not going to have children, well, my personal favorite and misogyny being, you're not married right now. Someday you might meet a man and he might want to have children. But
Yeah.
again, if I'd showed up pregnant, no one would have said to me, well, someday you might meet a man and he won't want to have children and he won't want to raise another man's baby. So you should really consider that before you continue this pregnancy. No one would have said that.
We are way off topic. So you're telling me that you think that the standard in America is that people will try to get you to abort your child?
Exactly. That's my point. No one will ever encourage you not to have children.
Oh, okay.
People will always encourage you to have children. And if you make the conscious decision to not have children, people second guess it like there's no tomorrow.
So hang on. All right. Hang on.
Of course, we're talking about this in the context of the mental illness. So it's a little throws it off.
Yeah. Let me flip this a little bit just so we don't get too far off track here. Because I understand everything that you're saying. And what you're basically saying, to sum it up, Lisa, is that strangers and society feel that they have a say in your reproductive choices, whether or not you have children, how you have children, how you raise children. And so we all know that that's a thing. Let's just establish that as a hard fact. My question is, why are they considering your mental illness? My question here is you said, and I agree with you, that society wants everybody to have children.
No,
until you have mental illness. No, I'm agreeing with you. Why are you trying to take it back?
That's not exactly what I'm trying to say.
That is what you think. And you're right. Society wants everybody to have children. You're right. Why are you trying to
There
run
is
it back?
this big asterisk, which is the thing that we're discussing right now, which is that as a young woman who was childless, there's a lot of pressure to have kids. But here she is saying, hey, I want to have kids. They're like, oh, unlike every other woman, you should not because you're bipolar.
Oh, okay.
There's
I see what you're saying.
a different dynamic at play when you get this idea of, I was, well, to be fair, these doctors probably didn't know I was mentally ill, but I was pushed very hard to not decide to not have children, but you're getting the opposite message. So I think the majority of women very strongly get this message of you should have children. So it's kind of interesting that no matter how overbearing society is about this, they are in fact willing to take that step back for women who are mentally ill.
I get it.
And you know what, though? I know as a teacher, looking at families, and there's sometimes we're just like, these people really shouldn't have had children. So it's not that everybody thinks
they're out there.
Have children. You're like, oh my gosh, and they're going to have two more. It's just...
You make a good point. Anything that is public facing, people are going to judge. We just need to point that out. Like, I have opinions on everything. When I'm driving around, I think of the opinion of that sign, the opinion of the shoes that guy is wearing at McDonald's. I judge people's orders. We are all judgmental creatures. It's when we take it the next step and we feel empowered to share that with strangers. When the guy in front of me orders a Diet Coke that he also wants coffee mixed in, I think to myself, that is disgusting. What would it take for me to feel empowered to tap that guy on the shoulder and say, what you ordered is disgusting? See, everybody would think that I was wrong if I did that. But if that person was deciding to have children and I found out that he had bipolar disorder and then I tapped him on the shoulder, people would root for me. They'd be like, good job pointing out that he shouldn't have kids.
Well, but
and I know
you also have to consider, though, Gabe, that the message is entirely different for women. Notice that you don't see a lot of people out there saying that men should decide not to have children if they're mentally ill, or saying that men need to make these decisions. This is about women.
Good point.
And
good point.
Every time you see something horrible that happens to a kid, stupid example, but years ago, remember when that poor child fell into the gorilla cage?
Yeah.
And the first thing everyone said is, where was his mother?
And the mom and dad were standing right there.
Yeah.
No one said, where was his father? What was his father doing? Why did his father not save him? So this expectation that you can comment on and talk about people's decision or how they raise their children is very much about how they mother their children. It's not about what fathers are up to.
All right. So we're off the rails. We know that society sucks. We know that society is very judgmental about how people raise their children. We know society is very judgmental about whether or not people have children. We know that society is very judgmental
what I'm saying
about...
is society is very judgmental about how women do that.
Yeah.
She's right. I agree with Lisa 100%.
And Lisa, you're right about it all comes back to the woman. And you're right. People don't say, well, you shouldn't have children because you're a man and you can pass on that bipolar gene or that mental illness gene.
Right.
That's absolutely true. No one says that. It's just as genetically passed on.
Right. It's
by
not
one
different.
Of us. Or both
it's the same odds.
I got to give a really, really hard pushback on this. I am a man who lives with bipolar disorder. And when my wife and I were dating and people found out that she was dating a man with mental illness, they did push back on her. They're like, you should not marry this man. You should not be with him. You should not have children with him. I'm not sure why we're playing the suffering Olympics, but I know that it's worse for women. But I'm telling you, as a man, I got a lot of shit. And when I dated, people broke up with me upon finding that I had bipolar disorder. To say that, it's worse for women, probably everything's worse for women.
But were you always very open about your illness? It wasn't something.
I had a website.
Were you? Okay.
I had a website and my own clothing line. I know that it's worse for women, Lisa. I know. Everything's worse for women, but I just don't want to leave men out to pretend that men aren't being discriminated against for living with mental illness. That's just disingenuous and unfair.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But every single time I say people, you say only women. Do you honestly believe that no man has ever been discriminated against for being a father with children?
No, I think it's important to point out when you say I get a lot of shit, you have no idea.
Just because
you have no idea how much shit is out there.
Where does that end? I can't help but notice that
it doesn't.
It doesn't, yeah.
Nobody should ever be able to get help because somebody is always going to be sicker.
That's not the point.
Then how come when I said about my experience, you interrupted my experience to talk about female experiences? You're saying that my experience has no value because women have it worse. Is that really the message that we want to get out there?
And I think, too, where I say, unless you're a mom, you don't understand what it is like to have children. I think the same thing can be said with, I'm a woman and I know how I'm treated because of my mental illness. I guess I don't think about how men are treated because I know how I'm treated. I never could understand because I'm not in your shoes. But, that's why we have podcasts and conversations because it helps open everybody's mind.
Exactly. Listen, I don't want to get a bunch of angry letters for people thinking that I think that that what I go through and what women go through are the same because they're not. But I also don't think that what middle class women go through and what lower class women go through is the same. And I certainly don't think that what middle class women and homeless women go through are the same. But if Lisa said, I need help for my mental illness, and I said, well, you have no idea what it's like to be mentally ill being homeless, Lisa would say that doesn't change the fact that I need help.
Right. It just goes back to that same scenario where, there's always somebody who has it worse off than I do. Well, it doesn't minimize my pain.
That's what I was trying to say. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. So now to pivot for the 35th time in this podcast.
Well, I do have one last question for Amy, and I think people are going to want to know how, I guess we can't really say how did it turn out because your children are still works in progress. But the first thing people are going to ask is, do your kids have mental illness? Is your son mentally ill? But I realize he's a little young for that question.
Not necessarily. I started my journey at 14. I mean,
well, that's fair.
The whole genetic thing, my bipolar, for example, with my brothers have children too. And I know when some of them have had their children in therapy, they don't bring up the fact that, oh, by the way, their aunt is bipolar because they don't want their child to be labeled right away.
Really?
Yeah, they're scared to death. And it gives me cool chills because I've always been open about my mental illness. It's not something that I'm ashamed of. And it's not that they're ashamed of it. It's just something I think that we're all afraid of because it's not easy living a life being mentally ill. It's a challenge. It's not impossible, but it is a challenge. And I know that's one of the things that my husband and I go rounds with. At 15, my son is so stinking moody, and he's never been. So, of course, I think, oh, my God, is he going to be bipolar? I mean, that scares me to death. And I don't see, knock on wood, I don't see any signs in him that I saw in myself. But it is definitely something that's at the front of everything that I do. But again, I'm reminded by good friends that say, hey, my 14 and 15-year-olds being moody. And with boys, they show it from what my girlfriends that have girls and then my girlfriends that have boys. It's very different how they deal with stress. But it is a concern. I mean, of course it's a concern. But, now knowing what I know now, like Gabe said, I had mentioned about talking about people that are really struggling during the pandemic. I have resources in place if need be. If they get to that point, I know, even that's true with my 23-year-old. If he's struggling, I'm also going to say, okay, well, let's look at our options. I always worry, is he going to be like me? But, my mom's a very smart woman, and I take what she says to heart most of the time. She has told me, you know what, if he is bipolar, which I pray to God that he isn't, but he's also going to have your good qualities, the way you see the world. It's not necessarily all because you're bipolar, or how you love film and how you love certain things that I see in me now. And I think, wow, those are things that I kind of pointed out to him since he was a little boy. And now he sees those things and he says to me, hey, Mom, guess what? Or he'll say, look at this, or, and I think those are things I've always pointed out to him. And that's just my personality. It's not because of my bipolar disorder.
Well, what I would say is obviously parents are worried about their children. Every parent of a 15-year-old is desperately worried about them. So
Right.
Are you worrying
Right.
more, or is this just the form your worrying is taking? Would you be worried about some other thing instead, but the same amount of worry, just different topic?
You know what? That's a great point. Absolutely. I mean, and I worry about, when he's 15, he's going to be driving soon. And I worry about, you tell him certain things like, well, you don't do this, and you need to make the right choice. You need to be the better person. And you hope to God and you pray to God that when they're out and about and they're with a group of friends, that they make the right choice. And like you said, that's just part of being a parent.
If your son was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, how would you feel? Would there be any element of, well, at least now we share this in common?
No, because I understand the struggles. And of course, you don't want your children to struggle like you did. I know how I struggle on good days, let alone bad days. And I don't want that for anyone, especially for my child. But knowing the resources that we have now, if it goes there, I hope to God that I know better how to handle it early on. So unlike me, who struggled for years and years and years, because we didn't know a lot about mental illness, that we jump on it right away so that we put the right plans in place to make sure that he also can have a highly functioning, good life. Because mental illness isn't a death sentence. It's just something that some of us struggle more than others.
I had many years ago, I saw this panel discussion. I, of course, am going to mess up. They said it much better than me. But the question was, how would you feel if your child was gay? And obviously, you love your child. You don't care if your kid is gay, but you do realize that a child that is gay is going to struggle a lot more than one who is not. And so how do you, does that translate to you saying, gee, I wish my kid wasn't gay? And how do you express that? How do you say that without it being so evil? So,
well, but homosexuality is not an illness.
Well, no, but as she's saying, well, obviously I love my child, et cetera, no matter if they're bipolar or not, or whether they're mentally ill or not, or whatever. No one wants their kid to have to struggle. You would also love it if your kid turned out to be, 6'2" and super attractive and had a perfect nose.
I mean, you're almost describing me.
And
athletic and extremely intelligent, because you want your kid
smart,
to have all the advantages and as little struggle as possible.
I think you need to consider, though, Lisa, that you just said it was easier being male. So should you only want sons?
Well, see, that's a valid question, actually. And that's an interesting point to raise as well.
But here is how I look at that. Here's how I break that down. There's a difference there that you have to look at. It is difficult being a woman or a member of the LGBTQ community because society is putting pressure on you. That makes society wrong. It is difficult to be bipolar because you have an illness. Even if society was perfectly nice and kind and loving and did everything right, you would still suffer because you have an illness. We could make being a woman equal. We could make being LGBTQ equal. We just don't. We just don't, because society is evil. This is an example of society being sick, whereas bipolar disorder is an example of you being sick. And we get the double because society is also sick.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Amy, what are your thoughts?
I've always wondered, how would it be different if I had a daughter compared to a son with this? And I honestly, and I don't know, again, Lisa, I think it goes from life being a little bit harder from our perspective for girls than it is for boys. I think I would struggle with this, with dealing, my God, could they be mentally ill? Could they have bipolar disorder? I think it would be harder if I had a girl, I guess, because, and I think it's because, do I look for patterns in my 15-year-old son? Of course I do. How could I not? But would it be harder, even more so with a girl? I think for me it would. I think I would read, if at all possible, I'd read into it even more.
Was there any history of mental illness in your family, Amy, or either of your parents bipolar?
That's interesting. You should bring that up. When I was diagnosed with bipolar, it was the early 90s. And the first time I ever heard manic depression was when I sat across a psychiatrist and he said, I believe you're manic depressive. I mean, that's the first time my family ever heard of it. And it was just a mere name to something my brothers and my mom and dad lived with all of my life. I was diagnosed at 21. So it was just like, oh, okay. This summer, my mom shared a story with me, and she had said, your great-grandmother had a cousin that his mind moved so fast that they had to give him medication to slow it down. And she said to me, I think he was schizophrenic. And I said, Mom, not schizophrenic. He was bipolar. And so that was really the first. I mean, we have, of course, which everybody does, I think, to some extent. Well, there's depression. Well, there's anxiety. But that was the first hint of it. I just really connected with that. It was like, oh, my gosh.
I am the only one. I am the only person with bipolar disorder in my entire family.
Does anyone else struggle?
No, it is what it is.
In any discussion about parenting or whether you should become a parent if you have mental illness or if you have bipolar disorder, it seems to be centered around three basic points. One of them being, are you yourself too psychologically fragile? Are you stable enough to be a parent and to do a good job? And then worried about if you're not stable, or if at some point you become unstable, what effect will that have on the child? How will that influence how they grow up or their childhood? And then the third thing I think people think about or wonder about is the genetics of it. What are the odds that this will be passed on?
All I can hear in all of that is that I don't think that's unique to people with bipolar disorder, though. I honestly believe that this is something that everybody contemplating becoming a parent should consider. Mm-hmm. And I really think our discussions over the course of the show just really shows that this is a very personal decision. And no two people with bipolar disorder are the same. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was a good idea for me not to have children. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a good idea for Amy to have children. Maybe it wasn't. But the only thing that I can unequivocally say is that it's Gabe's decision and it's Amy's decision. And the fact that the rest of society has sort of gotten involved and put their 2 cents in, we should probably just ignore them.
That's easier said than done.
I think that we should just do the right thing for ourselves and for our families and hope it turns out.
Right. I mean, Gabe, like you mentioned, it's a decision, and these are the same things I believe that other families are having as well. And you just pray to God that you're doing the right thing and that you're not screwing your kids up too much, and that, on the flip side of this, everything's going to work out, and you're going to trudge through, and you're going to make it. You're going to make it.
Honestly, Amy, I think that is the most sane explanation for how to survive with children that I have ever heard. I love it. I love it. Amy, I cannot thank you enough for being here and for being willing to go just so deep. Lisa, when we talked about the show, did you know that Amy would be just so willing to divulge so much about her marriage? Because you started off the show saying that discussing people's child rearing decisions was talking about their sex life. Do you feel that we put Amy in this position?
We definitely have to say thank you so much, Amy. You were very gracious. I mean, these are some personal questions. And so very nice of you to be willing to share so much with us.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really, really enjoyed it. It really left me also with some things to think about.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so nice of you to say.
And Amy, I am so super glad that you agreed to do This Is My Brave. For those who don't know, This Is My Brave is a great organization. You can go over to thisismybrave.org. You can also find them on YouTube. It's a theatrical production of people telling their stories in 5-minute sections. And it was incredible, and it was awesome, and it was how we met. And I want to give a huge shout out to This Is My Brave. Check them out on thisismybrave.org.
Absolutely.
Or Gabe and Amy never would have been a thing.
That's right. We are very thankful for This Is My Brave. What an amazing experience.
It was a great show. You guys did a great job.
Lisa was in the audience.
I was very impressed.
Once again, Lisa was behind the scenes while everybody else was front and center. Listen up, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Not Crazy Podcast. If you loved it, which we hope you did, please rate, rank, subscribe, and review. Give us as many stars as humanly possible and use your words. Tell people why you liked it. Share us on social media and use your words there too and tell people why they should listen. Write down psychcentral.com/notcrazy on a business card and pass it out wherever you can go. Of course, you really can't go anywhere, so you should probably just do email. If you have some show topics, ideas, you love us, you hate us, you just have anything to say, hit us up at show@psychcentral.com. We will see everybody next week.
Bye, everybody.
See you then. You've been listening to the Not Crazy podcast from Psych Central. For free mental health resources and online support groups, visit psychcentral.com. Not Crazy's official website is psychcentral.com/notcrazy. To work with Gabe, go to gabehoward.com. Want to see Gabe and me in person? Not Crazy travels well. Have us record an episode live at your next event. Email show@psychcentral.com for details.
You're not going to concerts or sporting events or restaurants. You've got nothing else to do but this.
I'm not good at this job. Yeah. I've got to try harder.
I have no idea what to say to that.
You're a good sport, Gabe. Thank you.